retired.
Sorry, John. Start again.
Yeah, so I'll start our introductions by saying my name is John Presbiora. I'm a founding board member of Greening USA. I'm a professional engineer, formerly worked at the city of Syracuse as both the city engineer and a commissioner of water. And I have the distinct pleasure of serving as your host for our Green Bag Lunches today. And I'm going to just point out people. We'll skip our speakers. I will introduce those later. I see Mary Ann here up in the corner. So unmute yourself and then mute when you're finished.
Okay. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Mary Ann Adams. I'm the Conservation Chair for Onondaga Audubon, and my interest is in finding out how we are preserving habitat to make sure that our bird populations don't drop as a result of all the development that's going to happen. So I just want to put a word in for preservation and conservation and find out what's going on.
Thanks, Mary Ann. David Sonnefeld.
Good afternoon, everyone. David Sonnefeld, retired professor of environmental studies at ESF, and looking forward to today's presentation.
Thanks, Dave. Dick.
Yeah, my name's Dick Kornbluth. I'm a retired home performance contractor, and I'm on the coordinating committee of CNY Solidarity.
Thank you, Scott.
I'm Scott Kushner. I'm a longtime member and now on the board of Green USA. I guess you could say my primary task or whatever is community outreach at this point. And I'm also looking forward to this presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Lindsay.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Spear. This is going to work. Next person.
Okay, we'll come back to you. Dave Mankiewicz.
Good afternoon, Dave Mankiewicz, Interstate CEO.
Thanks, Dave. Stephanie, good to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Stephanie Pasquale, I'm the Director for Neighborhood Development with the Allen Family Foundation. Good to be here.
Thank you. Peter.
Hi, Peter Arsenault, founding president of Greening USA, director of the 12 Pigs effort right now, and still a practicing architect, aspiring retiree, but we're getting there.
Right. And then Peter Sarver.
I've been a retiree for a while, but I like to think of myself as a good troublemaker. And I'm representing Moving People Transportation Coalition. We're working on public transportation right now.
Thank you, Peter.
I'm back. I'll just jump in.
Oh, so, Lindsay, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, Lindsay Spear. I work at the Central New York Regional Planning and Development Board and run the Energy Smart CNY program, the Regional Clean Energy Hub, providing a one-stop location for people interested in learning how to be more energy efficient in their homes and buildings. And I'll let you keep going.
Thanks, Lindsay. I see, I should know your first name, but I don't. Is it Joe Shepard?
Hi, Jared Shepard from Center State CEO.
Thanks. And then Marshall.
Yes, hi. I'm Marshall Swat. I'm a licensed real estate salesperson with Weichert, but my primary focus is on residential development work. I've got over 10 years experience doing like restoration and renovation of urban residential properties in Brooklyn and then here in Syracuse. And a lot of the work is focused on a sensitivity to design and the neighborhood context and revitalization. Thanks.
Thanks for joining. Alex.
Hi, my name is Alex Lawson. I work for CNY Fair Housing.
And then Barry Lentz.
Yeah, Barry Lentz, member of Green USA. Relevant to the topic today, I'm also a member of the City Planning Commission and the Onondaga County Planning Federation.
Thanks, Barry. And Josh Wilcox.
Josh Wilcox, City Syracuse Parks Department.
And Nikki.
Hi, Nikki Marquis. I'm the director of Skinny Atlas Library.
And Tyla is here. And maybe you're unaware that you're muted, as far as I can tell, or we can skip and go to Carol Biesmeyer.
Good afternoon, everyone. Carol Biesmeyer, member of Greening USA, and interested to hear about this topic today. Thanks.
Great, and thanks for being here, Carol. And I see Chris Carrick is joining in here. I think most of us know Chris, an energy planner at a regional planning board. So I think we should get started because there's a lot of ground to cover with this update to the plan on Onondaga by two great speakers, who have lived and
John, could I
for several years. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Diane. I meant to come back to you. I forgot you, and I was worried that we were using up our valuable time, but I do want to come back to you. Go ahead.
But it's time for shameless self-promotion. Diane Brandley, I've been a founding member along with Peter Arsenault and John Presbiora. Since 2003, Green USA has been advocating for sustainable communities to the benefit of local economies and environments. We are all volunteer, and as every other organization that's all volunteer, we struggle for resources. We struggle with our budget, we struggle with volunteers. So if you feel so inclined, we would love to have you as a member. We would love to have you involved and bringing new ideas to the table. So please let us know. Thanks.
Yeah, and I want to just echo that. We started Green Bag Lunch as a way for the community to share with each other and network. We can't do it ourselves. So it's really a forum for all of you to talk to the rest of us about what you're doing and either to spread the word or to get some accolades for all the good things that you're up to. And so our speakers today, first and not first in order, but first to introduce is Dan Kwasnowski, the planning director at Onondaga County Planning Agency. Dan is a certified planner of the American Institute by the American Institute of Certified Planners. He has held the job at Onondaga County Planning since late in 2018. He's also worked as a consulting planner. He's worked as an executive director of the Lake Placid Land Conservancy. He's worked as in a couple of different planning firms, LaBerge being one, a larger firm that he has worked for in the Albany area. And he's also worked as a town planner, working as a director of planning and an environmental planner in the town of Dryden. So Dan brings a lot of experience to the role of county planning director. And thanks to Dan for being here today to present on this topic. Sam Gordon, who will start us off today, is the planning practice leader at Syracuse headquarters design firm known as Environmental Design and Research, which got its start partly in Syracuse, partly in Rochester in 1979. It's a certified women-owned business, and now has 9 offices around the region. Sam, most of you might know from his previous role as Director of Planning for the town of DeWitt. He has also worked as a planner for the Central New York Regional Planning and Development Board, working on many different things, particularly the energy and climate change programs. Sam has worked as an adjunct professor at Lemoyne College and also at one time for the Onondaga Environmental Institute. So I'm going to turn this over to Sam to start our presentations. Sam and Dan will tag team this back and forth, and then when they're complete with their formal presentation, we will open it up to your questions. So Sam, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, John, for the introduction, and thanks for inviting Dan and myself to speak with you all today to talk about, I think, a plan that we're really proud of. I think the community should be proud of. And what we're going to do is kind of run through the plan from top to bottom. I have captured some images from the plan, not that I want you to read every word that's going to be on the screen, but more listen to what I'm saying about what's in the plan. And obviously the plan is at plan.ongov.net. So if you want to read more, dig deeper, there's an opportunity to see that. But I think the most important thing here is to recognize that when the county put this together, they were very interested not in planning per se, but in action. And so as we're going through the presentation, I'm going to be talking about the different themes in the plan, and Dan's going to share with you what we're already doing, what the county is already doing to implement the recommendations from the plan, which I think is really important to recognize. This plan was just adopted last year in July, and already there's the county has put money into implementation, which I think is really important. The plan does cover quite a few different things. There's a countywide profile, which I'm going to touch on. We talk about a framework for competitiveness, which is comparing Onondaga County to some peer communities around the country. There was community engagement involved in the process of developing the plan. And there's really 5 main themes, and we're going to touch on those themes: strong centers, housing and neighborhoods, community mobility, greenways and blueways, and agriculture. And then there's a focus on how does this plan get implemented. It was really important to us as we were putting this together to think about the role that Onondaga County can play in implementing a plan. And as you're going to see, Plan Onondaga is really a land use focused strategy. And we recognize, the county recognizes, it doesn't have local land use control or doesn't directly control local land use. So there are things the county can do. It can be an advocate. It can build capacity in local governments. It can be a leader, can help to establish policy. It can market itself and the good things that are happening here. And it can also invest in programs and different initiatives and capital projects. So we do know what the county can do. And the fact that it doesn't have local land use control directly is perhaps the reason why presenting a strong land use vision was not particularly threatening to all the local towns and villages or city. But it helps to provide, I think, a basis and a direction for decision making. It's really important to recognize that, and this has been well documented, there's been considerable growth in the urbanized area of the county. And now with the announcement about Micron and anticipated growth associated with that, we want to be really careful about where future growth is going to happen and what that looks like. And in the past and today, the county is does have, in a way, control over land use in that it does have a sanitary district. And where sewers are located within the county is one way of controlling or directing where growth may happen. We also, as part of Plan Onondaga, looked at the history of planning in Onondaga County, and the themes that are presented in the plan really were present since the beginning of planning in the county. So there's almost nothing new that we talk about that hasn't been thought about before. So thinking about establishing strong centers, for example, this is something that has been explored through the history of planning in the county. I mentioned that we did look at comparing Onondaga County to other peer counties. And we did that because we felt very strongly that if we just look, for example, at Onondaga County against other upstate counties, we're all maybe experiencing similar problems. So we wanted to start to look at maybe some aspirational places like a Boulder, Colorado, or Wake County, North Carolina, and the Research Triangle, and start to think about understand what's happening in those other counties and what might we need to focus on or do to compete with our peers. And we developed an index to help us to look at that. So we looked at what are other regions doing and investing in their people, what kind of economic strength or health is present in other communities, and how do other communities counties compare with us in terms of the development of what we call strong centers in this document. And ultimately, what we discovered from that process is actually Onondaga County is quite competitive in our investments in people and our strong centers. But when we start to look at Onondaga County from an economic perspective, we tend to have a lower per capita income, lower median household income, lower diversity in employment, and lower jobs per household. And I think with the announcement of Micron, that really helps us to understand how important that investment is for our region, because we do have a lot of the other things that other regions have, but that economic strength and health and really making sure that we have living wage, high paying quality jobs for our workforce is critical to our future. We did spend a lot of time working with the county and engaging people within the county in hearing, what some of the issues were that people wanted to see addressed. And I have to really credit Dan because Dan spent a lot of time before Plan Onondaga started meeting with local municipal leaders, town supervisors, village mayors, with the city to understand and start to develop the themes that underpin this plan. And that dialogue is what helped to build, I think, support for this document even before we started the development of it. So we did continue that. We did hold a series of focus group meetings with municipal leaders in different geographies within the county. There was a website. We developed a story map, which you can also access through plan.ongov.net, that helps to profile the different themes of the plan and helps to build a common knowledge and understanding of what the trends are, both demographic trends, but also looking at kind of the state of the art for each one of these the themes. We did go to the community. We had pop-up meetings. We also worked with the county to piggyback on the Onondaga County Planning Federation to hold a summit, which was in conjunction with the Planning Federation, that really focused on some of the initial findings of the plan and hearing feedback on that, which helped us to work towards finalizing some of the recommendations included in the themes. From the work that we did, there were some very strong themes that came out. People want to see walkable centers within the region with a diversity of housing options. People are very concerned about cost of housing throughout the county, and also recognizing that the quality of our housing is a critical piece to attracting and retaining our workforce, and that we also need to be providing for aging households. I think was a shared agreement that the natural environment within the county is one of our strongest assets and something that we need to protect. And also that a continued focus on improving transit service, continuing to build out our county's trail system, and bike an alternative mobility infrastructure so that people have options when they're moving around the county. And also that agriculture is really a critically important piece of our character as a community, and making sure that we are doing everything that we can to maintain that working landscape. So now I'm going to start to touch on our themes, and this is where I'll be handing it off to Dan to talk about where we're going. So for each of the themes that are represented in the plan, we do have a collage of images that we heard from our people contributed from our pop-up meetings. These are some of the things that we heard people say that relate to each of the themes. We did develop a vision for each theme. And we start to outline, so when we talk about strong centers, what do we mean? So we did identify different types of centers. So for example, a traditional center is a village. An emerging center might be a place that an existing intersection within the county that might not have a walkable character, but where we want to support the development of a walkable urban character, maybe on a little bit smaller scale. We identified town growth centers, and those are areas, if you think about the announcements that have been made about Shopping Town Mall in DeWitt or Great Northern Mall in Clay, it's really thinking about some of those larger mall redevelopment projects or strip development areas within the county where we could actually create more dense urban centers. We also talk about employment centers, and we have places like Carrier Circle, or where the area where the Micron is going to be making their investment, which are critically important for workforce and for the future growth and health of the community. And then there's city centers. So that's probably pretty straightforward if you think about downtown Syracuse, but not just downtown. Franklin Square, the Syracuse Inner Harbor, University Hill, and the interconnectedness of those types of neighborhoods. We also spent some time in the plan starting to do analysis to identify where there may be future opportunities for fostering the growth of centers. And this vibrancy analysis that we worked on with the county planning staff starts to identify some of the commercial corridors like West Genesee Street, Erie Boulevard East, East Genesee Street, Route 11 North, Old Liverpool Road, and other parts of the community where there is a development pattern that if we started to focus on what's allowed within that development pattern, we might be able to foster land use change over time that leads to the creation of those walkable mixed use places. Each theme in the document, we do show a land use vision. And I think it's really important to recognize that all the things we're talking about are interconnected. If we want to preserve open space, sensitive ecological corridors, farmland, we need to make sure that the new development that's happening is happening in or closely adjacent to areas that are already developed. And that is part of that strategy of preserving open space. But within this, you can see that all of the different types of centers within the county are laid out. City center, town growth centers, and the emerging centers, and even traditional centers, our villages, our historic villages and hamlets throughout the county. Dan?
Thanks, Sam. Hi, everybody. So one of the things that we've been doing, and this has been going on since before the plan was adopted, really our community development department has a really strong Main Street program, and they've done a great job working with existing villages and other centers throughout the county to help them kind of spruce up their main streets and help local business owners and property owners kind of fix up their properties, make more opportunities for housing, for strengthen their commercial activities on their main streets. But I think the more important thing that we're doing as a plan, not more important, but an important thing that we're doing as our planning department is, you know, I've got a slate of about $1 million that we're giving out to towns and villages to update their comprehensive plans. In some cases, do the first one, like the town of Salina just started working with Sam to create their first comprehensive plan. And it's all in line with Plan Onondaga. And I think the important thing about that is not only, you know, subsidizing their creation of their local comp plans in line with our strategies, but also that they want to. They're really excited about doing it, and they're really excited about what we have in the plan and the resources that we can bring to them. And I think that they can see better now that, you know, land use planning goes beyond regulations. It's really about building those relationships and kind of bringing those resources to your community to make it the place that you want it to be. So we have about $1 million slated right now for several towns and villages to update their plans and their code at the same time. And we have another $1 million that really is going to go towards creation of stronger centers, whether it's in a transit corridor, like Sam just kind of pointed out, the transit corridors, and rebuilding or adding development into areas that are already commercially developed, but maybe introducing residential or other mixed uses in those areas. And of course, you know, someplace like Shoppingtown or Great Northern, or places where we want to create a town center and create that walkable urban environment that nationally and locally, everybody points that they want that in their community. Now, it doesn't mean that they want to live in the middle of it, but they want it nearby. They want it accessible to them. And I think that really lays the groundwork for kind of addressing a lot of issues, especially housing diversity and affordability. You know, when people can see that you're not just building housing, you're building a place that they want in their community, that they want to visit, then that makes a big difference as to what you can and what you can do and what people are going to oppose. So first, as far as strong centers, you know, that is really the basis of our strategies is planning, because they're not easy to create, they're not easy to maintain, and they're not easy to strengthen. And the other thing I'll throw in here, and we'll talk about it in a little while, but you can't take transportation out of this equation. You know, it's called the Main Street program for a reason. That street and what it's connected to and how it connects people and how people get there and go where they need to go from there is really important. And that's why I think the transit corridors that we identified and the centers along those transit corridors are super important, because that really lays the groundwork for not only where housing should go, but how it will serve future mobility options. And we'll talk about that in community mobility.
Great, thanks, Dan. So for housing in neighborhoods, the overall vision is that the county will support affordable, attractive, and efficient housing in neighborhoods to retain and attract future residents. And the plan really does focus on, which I think is a critical housing issue. It's not just in Onondaga County, but across upstate New York. In fact, I just was at the New York State Housing Summit a couple weekends ago with Dan and some others on this call, and hearing about the importance of addressing what's called the missing middle housing. It's somewhere between single family housing and multi-story downtown housing. That's a housing type that we have not really focused on across the US over the last 50, 60 years. There has been an uptick in the development of multifamily housing within Onondaga County over the last decade, but we also recognize through the plan that there are shortages in that. And in every census tract in Onondaga County, renters are cost burdened. Whether it's a wealthy area or not so wealthy area, it doesn't matter. People are paying more for rent than they can afford, than they should be affording. There's also some really important trends that are impacting housing in the county and across the country. One of those things is that there's been a significant change in the percentage of households with kids. That used to be a major driver in our housing market. And the reason why we built so many single family homes, I feel. But the overall percentage of those households has declined precipitously. So now, we're looking at, maybe 25 to 30% of households have kids, and the other 70% don't. And that means they're looking for a different type of housing. They might not care about a school district, for example, or they don't need as many bedrooms, or they don't want to mow a lawn or have a place for their kids to play in the yard. They want to live in a more urban environment. So these are changes that are happening nationally and are mirrored locally in Onondaga County. Within the plan, I think there's some important strategies that are outlined. One is to look at expanding housing choice throughout the county. And Dan was just talking about the county's efforts to encourage local municipalities to update local comprehensive plans and update their zoning. And that's the tool, that's the place that we have to affect this kind of change. And there are multiple towns and villages throughout the county that are starting to look at making those changes. We also identify that it's really important to understand the market forces that are impacting the county and all the county's different types of housing and neighborhoods. And the first strategy that was identified was to conduct a full market and housing needs assessment. And that's something that, not to steal Dan's thunder, but they're starting to work on.
So yeah, so we are kind of at the tail end of our housing study, working with CCB, the same firm that conducted the city's housing study. But even a bigger program, and that's going to really guide kind of the decisions that we help communities make in the future, and what those plans really account for and what we're working towards. The community development department has I think 10 million is actually a little low. That's just the number I could pull off really quickly. We have a housing incentive program, and part of that is to kind of get past this. We have a interest rate, supply chain, labor shortage issue as far as costs of building new housing, building anything right now. But that, is 10 million plus, and it's really to support people building the types of housing that we need in the community and kind of get it online sooner rather than later. We were doing well as a county up until about 2020, and then everything kind of stalled, and we've had it's been a little slow getting going again. And the other thing, the next thing that we're really going to be looking for is neighborhoods, because we're kind of looking at housing from a spreadsheet right now and from data. And one of the things I worry about as a planner is that if we're going to build a lot of housing, we want to build it in the right places, as we've kind of indicated, but we also want to create neighborhoods. We want to create community. And I think that is a challenge. I think it's a challenge for all communities, but that's the next thing that I hope to kind of put some programs together and start rolling out in the next couple of years. Is how do we build new housing? How do we accommodate housing that people need? But how do we do it in the places that we want, and in a way that in great places that people want to live in? But I think that pretty much accounts for all that.
Thanks, Dan.
Yeah.
So we also focused on mobility, and thinking about how we can improve the safety, accessibility, and diversity of options for moving people around the county. And we outlined a vision for what might this look like, and thinking about our corridors and thinking about the transportation options that we're planning for. So looking at things like establishing bus rapid transit within the county. And that's something that we know that Centro is actually actively working on now. to even improve our existing transit service outside of bus rapid transit, creating bicycle infrastructure and connections to trails outside of our street grid, but also thinking about how do we accommodate for the future of transportation, autonomous vehicles, and other things like that, and understanding that there's a really strong connection between our mobility infrastructure and our land use patterns. And that's where I think there's a lot of cross-cutting themes in this plan. And that is certainly a really important one. So within the plan, we did identify specific mobility corridors. And each one of those, there's the dark blue lines that you see throughout here are intended to be transit corridors. So, for example, Route 11 going up to Clay from downtown Syracuse, Route 57, Route 31, which would go past the Micron site, James Street in Syracuse, West Genesee Street, East Genesee Street, South Avenue up to OCC, and South Salina Street are some examples. There's also, it may be hard for you to see on the screen, but there also are dotted yellow lines, which are anticipated to be bicycle corridors. So, there's a really forward-thinking vision of where and how we should be incorporating mobility options within our transportation network. And there's some bold things that the county identified in this plan. One was to become a Vision Zero community, and I'll let Dan talk about what the next step towards that is. But if you don't know what Vision Zero is, it's about looking at eliminating deaths and serious injuries in our transportation network, and there's a lot of different ways to do that. And also, we should be looking at investing in transit corridors throughout the county. And I'm going to let Dan, why don't you touch on that?
Okay. So one of the main things we're doing, and the numbers are going to seem small here, but that's because a lot of our transportation improvements, the actual improvements are probably going to be covered by federal money. And so this is all kind of preparing us to make sure that we're using that federal money that we get very carefully and towards the things that we want. So one of the big things that we got last year, we had written a grant for a Safe Streets for All action plan. You have to have a qualifying action plan to access Safe Streets for All funding for capital projects, but it's a huge program, and we could be eligible for up to $30 million a year in Vision Zero oriented projects, which could be a protected bike lane, could be a trail, could be a sidewalk, could be speed cameras, whatever it is. So we're going to be hitting the street with an RFP in the next month or so for that plan. And that's a $450,000 project. We'll cover the whole county, including the city. Will make us eligible for a lot of future funding for the projects that everybody wants to see. And that's really based on a lot of public engagement. That's one of the main requirements of that program. The other thing that we're working on, as Sam touched on the transit corridors, is, we work with Centro. I'm on the board of the MPO, the executive committee. And one of the things that we put together that's kind of interesting is we're looking at a transit study in the Route 31 corridor. And what we're looking at is there's no transit there now. And what we're looking at with the local communities up there, with the towns and villages, is how much development do you need to really support a transit system, and at what level, from basic bus service to a light rail. So, and it's twofold. For one, to be prepared for future change in that corridor and make sure that we're creating a corridor that can accommodate multiple modes. But the other thing is so that communities know that you have to have a certain level of development in the nodes, in your centers, to support that transit system, to support a certain level of transit system. And that's really kind of a very future thinking. And it's interesting to do it in a corridor that doesn't have any transit right now. And then this actually ties in as well with our greenways program, because our greenways are about connectivity, and not all greenways need to have a trail, but what we're trying to do is really bring those greenway elements into every neighborhood in the county, basically. So that everybody has access to nature and has access to the connectivity that those greenways can provide. And I think that's another kind of important part of not only where we develop and how we develop, but how much access, kind of an equitable access to mobility and equitable access to natural resources, and kind of a natural environment that's healthy.
It's a good segue. So there is a theme about greenways and blueways, and Onondaga County seeks to protect and expand greenways and blueways to provide for both unique recreation, but also to preserve and enhance the ecological health of our natural communities. We do kind of explain in the plan what do we mean when we say greenways and blueways, and part of this is thinking about how we connect from the center of our community, from Syracuse and the city's park system to county parks to trail systems that go throughout the county. So this maroon-ish line would be a mobility corridor, think like the Empire State Trail, and that does go on some city streets, and it also goes in through park systems. So this is really about thinking about how we tie all these different systems together. And blueways are water bodies. It's thinking about the New York State Barge Canal system, the Finger Lakes and Skinny Atlas and Otisco. We also have Oneida Lake. How do we enhance and protect and think about promoting those waterway systems within the county? We do have already a pretty extensive greenway trail system. If you think about the Empire State Trail through Onondaga County, the Loop the Lake Trail around Onondaga Lake, which the county has been working on for many decades and is working on closing that last segment along the southeastern shore of the lake. And we also have the city of Syracuse Creek Walk, right? All those things interconnect, and that's something the county and the city and the state have been collaborating on and working together to build that system. So continuing to invest in that system is an important part of this. And there's some big infrastructure investments like the bridge over CSX by Onondaga Lake, which was a significant investment by Onondaga County. So I know there's at least one person on the call that's really interested in the open space system. So we, in the plan, the dark green corridors that you see are intended to be greenway corridors. And this is not a new concept. This has appeared in previous plans in Onondaga County. But now, where do we go from here? Well, we thought about, this county looking to invest in ongoing planning to identify protections and other things that could be done to enhance those greenway systems.
And to do that, we have an unprecedented amount of money available, and 7.4 million towards greenway planning and implementation projects. And that is really just county funding. So if you threw in the bridge that we're planning to complete Loop the Lake, it's at least double that in addition. So, our greenways are fairly complicated. Just the Onondaga Lake Greenway alone, anybody that's worked in that area around that lake knows that anything you do there is far more complicated than the same thing you would do anywhere else. So our price tags tend to be a little higher in those areas. So, but one of the things we're doing so much kind of adjacent to direct greenway planning, but one of the things I know my staff and I are super excited about is really engaging with local communities to do some natural resource inventorying, some stream health inventorying, and really putting that together in a strategy, a greenway strategy, greenway protection strategy, looking at lands that need to be protected or lands that need to be conserved, working with local communities, to really put in place conservation subdivision strategies where you set aside most of the land and develop only a portion of it if you are going to develop. These are all super important and take a big lift, with 35 municipalities. But the great thing about the Greenway program, as I said before, is really our overall goal is to make sure that they're accessible to everybody throughout the county. And I think like Sam's work on Onondaga Creek in the city, and you look at the parks in the city in that corridor, I mean, that's an amazing asset that we have. And these are just amazing assets that we have throughout the county that really enhance our quality of life and make our county someplace that people want to live. And we need to make sure that we maintain those areas and make sure that we're protecting areas that need to be protected, and making sure that we promote those areas too, and make people aware that they even exist. So we're really excited to do a lot with that. And then there are assets like this picture of the trail, and even if you consider that we have an amphitheater, within our greenway, like that really tells you, these greenways are more than just protecting land. They're also enhancing development, enhancing our quality of life, really, making our county that much more livable and healthy from an environmental standpoint. And having that map, that land use map, really says like this is what we think these areas need to be. We know that this is where our natural resources are concentrated, whether it's for a drinking water source or for a fishery like 9 Mile Creek, where I live, in the village of Marcellus, or the Allegheny Plateau to the south, where our state forests are. I mean, throughout the entire county, we have resources like that. We need to make sure that we recognize that they exist, and make sure that we're not only not taking away from them, but enhancing them at every opportunity that we can.
Last but not least, agriculture. So I said earlier that people really identified throughout the process the importance of agriculture, maybe to our community's spiritual health, right? It's just a really important part of the landscape. And I think probably each of us values the ability to drive out there and see that, active, a lot of it working farmlands, which is an important part of our landscape. So we started to identify, what makes up that agricultural system, things like crop diversity. There's a significant dairy industry in Onondaga County that we need to be stewards of the natural areas that help to support the ecological health of farms. Looking at emerging technologies and renewable energy. We started this call, John, talking about agrivoltaics, but thinking about, where does renewable energy investment fit within the agricultural system in the county? And also thinking about the conflicts between residential development and active farm properties. We did work in parallel. We were working in parallel with the county on the Onondaga County Farmland Protection Plan. And as part of that, we developed a mapping tool that helps to identify priority lands within the county for farmland protection. This is a tool that the county now is using to evaluate applications for farmland protection. So, I think we have limited resources. We have to be really smart about how we use those resources to protect lands that are most at risk.
So we do so much with ag now. I sit on the Ag and Farmland Protection Board through my position, which endorses all preservation projects. So from the New York State FPIG program, the Farmland Protection Implementation Grant Program, which buys easements on farms. We also administer the Ag Council, which runs the our on Farm Fest and Onondaga Growing programs. And one of the things that we're doing, we did secure $5 million in implementation funds. One of the first things that we're looking at is working with the New York State Central New York Regional Market and a revitalization strategy. That's a new project that we're getting off the ground right now. And really working with that organization to make sure that they have the resources they need. They have a lot of repairs. They have a lot of, and kind of looking at, what does that market need to be in the future to be self-sustaining, and how does it continue to serve farms and provide local food to local people. So there's a lot of things going on. We've protected over, I think, 13,000 acres now in farmland. There's a lot more. There are a lot more farms that want to put their farms in that program. I think one of the biggest thing that the plan does is just on the map identifying that agricultural area. That is the primary land use there. I mean, that is what that area is about. That's what we want it to stay. That's what we want it to continue as. And kind of really drawing that line and saying, this is where our best farmland is. This is where our most active agricultural areas are, and that's what it needs to continue to be. And so we're doing everything we can to make sure that that happens, and working really closely with the ag community and with the food system community to make sure that we're kind of tying all the pieces together.
And just to be specific, the lighter green area that you see all around the county are those areas that were identified for agriculture. Okay, I just want to show two other things, and I know we're getting close to an hour, and there's probably questions. So there is an image in here. There's a whole section of the plan that's about tying all this together. And I do think it's really important to understand that there are connections between reinvesting in corridors to make them more walkable and neighborhood accessible, making sure that there are investments in greenway systems that are proximate to the areas where people live, so people have access to those greenway systems, but also thinking about developing opportunities to have access to the working lands. So, agritourism is a big thing in Onondaga County now, and how do we create connections for those farms so that people maybe can spend a day biking out to a local agritourism site, and whether it's a brewery or whatnot, and experience that open space in the countryside. And so for each strategy, we do outline what some of the cross-cutting measures are to think about and to focus on how we continue to look at developing synergy and connectivity between the different strategies of the plan. So I think we should stop there because I'm sure there's some questions, and I know that we've said a lot. So
yes, thanks a lot, Sam and Dan. Very comprehensive. You're right. There's a lot in here, and I'm sure there are a lot of questions. I have a lot myself. If people have questions, either put them in the chat or raise your hands, and we'll try to get to your question one way or the other. I think that there were a couple of things that were put in the chat. I want to make sure people saw them. Dan put the link in the chat to this plan so you can read it and spend some more time digesting all of this stuff. And Barry Lentz put an announcement about the planning I think this is the Planning Federation symposium, Barry, that's going to be on March 13th. So check that out. I've attended those, and they're great programs. So a lot to be gained by attending there. I'm just going to take the prerogative of the chair and ask a question that that relates to the population growth that we've seen projected as in terms of some of the elected officials' statements or in the press about what the population growth of the county will be over the next 20 years or so. As the Micron projects get developed, I've seen population figures, estimates from 60,000 to 120,000. So my question is what population projections are utilized in creating this plan, and can the plan and the strategies and the protections that you laid out here, can they be maintained and also meet that type of population growth? And so I don't know if Dan, if you can take that, or maybe Sam. Either one,
Yeah.
both of you.
No, I mean, I can take it. Actually on the whiteboard right behind me, but you can't really read it because my handwriting is so messy. But yeah, that's a great question. That seems to be the elephant in the room. This plan, we did look at it, but it's not in the plan. And I think Sam would agree that we kept looking at it saying the strategy doesn't change. And even at the kind of the tail end of our housing study, working with CZB, I mean, we all have agreed, like, no, this is still the plan. The difference is, you know, if you're working in a center and you're going to build a 2-story building, maybe you should consider a 4-story building. If you're at shopping town, instead of considering 300 units, maybe you should consider 1,000 units. You know, it's not a matter of, you know, horizontal growth. It's a matter of vertical growth. It's a matter of sticking to the plan, putting the resources where you want them, or the resources already exist as far as water and sewer and the transportation infrastructure, schools, et cetera, like, and growing those areas from within instead of growing out. And that's still the strategy. Our sanitary district was designed in 1968 for 700,000 people. So even if it's 120,000 people, even if it's 200,000 people, we're still within that limit. So we don't, you know, the plan considered it, we thought about it, we did every projection we could, and we can't see any way that we would change our overall strategy as a county, which means that you probably don't change it much for your local communities. And population growth is a tricky number because we have outside of the city, within the city, you have about 25% of households are 65 and older. Outside of the city, they're about anywhere from 40 to 60%, 65 and older. Well, in 20 years, they're going to be 85 and older, and they're going to have a very different housing need than they do now, if they need a house at all. Hopefully they still do. I think we all hope that we make it that long. But I know for me, you know, even if, you know, my relatively, you know, a little bit younger age than that, you know, I'm not going to need the house I have right now in 5 years. You know, I'm not going to have 2 children anymore. So they're going to be hopefully out of the house. But so we have to look at all those changes and things. But the thing that doesn't change, and the thing that's been happening since 1960, is that we have household change, and we have an increase in the need of households, whether we grow or not. And that's what kind of complicates matters, is that people think, oh, well, if we're not growing, we don't need houses. Even without any growth at all, since 1960, we would need to increase our housing stock by about 20%. And that's kind of a national figure. But just kind of give you an idea, just because of divorce, because of aging, because of more people living alone, more people living with roommates, whatever it is, you know, there is a demand for new housing units. It's just a different unit than what we're used to building. I don't know if Sam wants to add anything to that, or.
Yeah, well, the only thing I would say, so the county is working on their housing study, which will, I think, address some of the need that we might anticipate, and it is complicated by some of the things that Dan was just talking about. We're also working on a study that's looking at the broader 6-county region and housing demand and housing need, and trying to identify, John, where are we most likely to experience demand for new housing within that 6-county area, and more importantly, I think, is how prepared are we for it? So do we have the local land use framework for allowing the kind of housing that we need? And what we know is there are some places that do have that, but the majority of that 6-county area does not. So we need to start focusing resources on policy changes, whether they're local regulatory changes, or making sure that we have the proper incentives in place to encourage the development of the type of housing that we need.
Sam, can you just restate the 6-county plan? What entity is developing that?
So the lead on that is Empire State Development, and it covers Onondaga, Cayuga, Cortland, Madison, Oswego, and Oneida counties.
Thank you. I see one question in the chat. Does this plan help prevent further arbitrary suburban sprawl? Does the county have a way to prevent towns from ignoring this plan? And that's a good question. I kind of have the same thing. What controls are in place to get the towns to conform their plans to the county plans?
Well, the biggest thing that we have is influence. We don't necessarily have control. Sorry, my sustainable light over here keeps turning off. You know, and we've had great success with that. So it's not, you know, as far as I can tell, nobody's ignored the plan. I think they all recognize its validity. But, you know, the plan is the county's plan, and our strategy is our strategy to work with the local communities, you know, hand in hand, and build relationships with them to make sure that we're all working in the same direction. And so far, so good. Now, does that mean, I mean, you know, we can't prevent things. We can inhibit them maybe, but we can't really prevent them. And I don't think that's even a good strategy to even go that route. What we're saying with this plan is this is what we found. And we work, I mean, our main stakeholder in this plan was towns and villages. So, I mean, that's one of the reasons why we've had such great buy-in from them. But, you know, working with them to create the places and the land use pattern that we want is our best strategy for, you know, everybody complying with the plan or supporting the plan or getting, or, you know, working towards this similar goals and aligning our interests. And, you know, to a fault, I don't think everybody that I've been working with, all the towns and villages are working with, are right on board with it. Like they see it every day, they see it in their own families, they see it in their own communities, and they see the benefits of what we're proposing to help them create for their community.
Yeah. So just, Dan, a couple things to add to that. One, the county does have control over the sanitary district, and I don't think that we can ignore how important that is. So there are no plans to expand the sanitary district, and that really is a limit on, it doesn't prevent all kinds of growth, but it is a significant limit on growth within the county. And that is acknowledged in Plan Onondaga. The other thing is, you know, can the county prevent towns from ignoring this plan? No, but there is a county planning board. They do review projects that are proposed throughout the county, and they do try and influence those decisions to the best that they can. And as Dan stated earlier, they are also putting money on the table for towns and villages to update their comprehensive plans and local zoning. And with that comes the string of what you're working on needs to take into account Plan Onondaga. It needs to comply with the recommendations from Plan Onondaga. So it's, you know, it's the development process in New York State is messy, as our home rule state. But I think the county recognizes that and is putting resources where it can to help to influence those outcomes.
I think the other, and thanks, Sam, that's really well put. I think the other thing to consider that people probably aren't that aware of, but, you know, Sam and I are both certified planners, so we're familiar with all the Supreme Court cases in history. And as a town planner, I know that, you know, even if the town wanted to just say no to all kinds of development, they can't. There's court precedent, there's takings clauses in the Constitution. I mean, there's limits on what regulations can impose. I mean, there are overreaches, and towns are liable for that. So you can't just expect a town to make a decision that's going to put them in a terrible position for a decision that they can't defend, which is expensive for the residents and is just a you know, not a good strategy for them either. So we're very cognizant of that, and that's why, you know, we don't have to enjoy a lot of the policies that people put in place, but you have to recognize that to a certain extent, like, it's not a free-for-all. You can't just do whatever you want at a local government level. there is a high level of responsibility to your property owners as well as kind of a legal responsibility to make the decisions within the bounds of what you're allowed to.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. I see Marshall asked a question about building codes. Marshall, do you want to voice that question yourself?
Yeah, sure. It's an issue that comes up chronically. I hear it raised by people in other towns and cities, out in Buffalo or in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, but also certainly relevant very much here, that people looking to build or even do substantial renovation and improvement to, say, 2-family, 3-family, 4-family homes, or looking to build quadplexes or 8plexes, the building codes just make it financially infeasible because they require costly sprinkler systems, they require elevators, they require a substantial amount of off-street parking. So does this plan look into that and at addressing that?
The parking is new to me. I don't know that the building code really addresses parking, but I know I can see Owen's on the call, Owen Kearney, deputy. I don't remember what your title is now, deputy administrator for city planning. Owen and I used to work together. But we, when we were working on rezone in the city, one of the things we did in the R2 district was enable people to expand the number of units from 2-family to more and kind of drop the parking requirement along the process to make that feasible. As far as elevators and sprinklers, I'm not a building code expert anymore. I used to have building code people when I worked for a town, and I know that's changed since then over the last 10 years. But at least the parking you can easily drop, especially in a city or when you have access to transit. And the city has done that. The city's probably done the most, with rezone as far as in that direction. As far as the other code, that's I mean, the ICC, you have to start there, and you have to work at the state level when they adopt the new codes to make sure that they're adopting things that make sense. But you're right, there are a lot of code. I don't know if Sam's run into this, but when I used to design, subdivisions or conceptual subdivisions, you want to put an alley in. If you have more than 3 units on it, it has to be so wide, and you end up having another street instead of an alley, and fire access and all those different things. So it does get very complicated as far as land use for sure.
Thanks, Dan. Chris Carrick, you had a question about help that the county might be able to provide. You want to express that yourself?
Sure, thanks, John. Just wondering what can the county do to help municipalities win DRI grants, New York Forward, Main Street grants to help leverage, some of the great planning that's being done?
Well, we do provide limited grant writing. So we've written a grant. Another project that we're currently starting is a local waterfront revitalization program grant up in Baldwinsville, Lysander. Our capacity is pretty limited as far as how many grants we can write in a cycle. So, but we do encourage villages and towns, especially since those programs are expanding. And I know New York State has expanded their staff. In fact, I lost a staff member to the DRI program, sadly. Still hurts, which is excellent. Yeah, so we do what we can, and we're working closely with the state to make sure that the towns and villages do get those resources to be able to write those grants. But I think that the comprehensive planning that we're doing with them is going to help them a lot, because when they have that vision and when they know what they really want, it's going to help strengthen their program eligibility and kind of the ideas that are behind it, so they can really hit the ground running.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it was a shameless plug. Just encourage you to refer those folks to us. We can help write grants too.
Yeah. So, but one of your other questions, Chris, was about the impact of seniors on communities, and we do touch on that in the plan. There are some communities that over 40% of their population are people age 65 and older, and that there's kind of almost like a tidal wave of people. You could think about, well, maybe if they move out, that would free up housing for folks. But in many cases, people are not moving out because there aren't options available for them. So part of this strategy needs to be looking at making sure that we have adequate housing for seniors. But we also need to make sure that those communities that are going to see that significant turnover in population due to people aging out, essentially, that the homes that are there get reutilized, right? We don't just build new, but maybe have programs in place that help people to reinvest in the houses that we have, which maybe are outdated or have other issues with them, right? So I think that is an important part of the overall housing strategy within the county.
Thanks, Sam. I see Tyler has posted a question, and you didn't get a chance to introduce yourself before, so maybe tell us who you are and go for it.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me this time?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Tyler Worrell. I'm the Executive Director for Urban Jobs Task Force of Syracuse. And basically what we do is we advocate for and with disadvantaged Syracuseans for equitable economic opportunities. My question, I don't even know if it's fair to ask this team, but I figured I'd put it out there and ask. Do you know if this plan includes or suggests ideas for affordable or mixed use housing, if that's even in your lane, to shed some light on?
Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
Both.
Go ahead, Sam.
Well, both. I mean, it's when we're looking at affordability, part of it is about the diversity of housing types that we have, the density of development that we allow, and we can connect that increased density to reduced housing costs per unit. But also we need to recognize that there is an issue with the affordability of housing within the county, and making sure that we have adequate housing countywide, and not just in the city, but looking throughout the housing stock within the county and making sure that that is available to the extent that the county can influence it with the tools and resources that it has.
Yeah, and the mixed use, I think a lot of the planning that we're doing, one of the things that I've heard from communities when we've talked about it is, when you look working in a transit corridor that's dominated by commercial uses, maybe single story commercial uses, and they start to see the potential for introducing housing types that maybe would be opposed in other areas of their community, but when you tie it together with a mixed use strategy and a walkable center strategy, then all of a sudden it serves the entire community. So you're not just proposing a housing project, you're proposing a mixed use project with a housing component, a certain amount of which is affordable. And that's a huge difference. It's just a very different conversation. And it's someplace that we really need to get to as a community. And then our housing study, obviously we're going to have all kinds of data on how it impacts, kind of what level we are unaffordable or are affordable. And how it impacts our communities, not only from a housing perspective, but from an economy perspective. If people are spending too much on their housing and they don't have as much discretionary income to spend on local businesses and can't support those mixed use developments, blah, blah, blah. The other thing that we're looking at, I think is important, I don't think, we often talk about housing affordability, but we don't talk about the other side of it, which is if people find an affordable house, but it's farther away from where they work or where they need to be, and they have to drive around more, that just increases their transportation costs, which can be just as high. And we need to really balance those things so that people can, build wealth and move forward. The other thing that's really come to my attention lately is the invisible householdless. The people that have roommates that would rather live on their own, or that they can't afford to move in with their partner because it's too expensive as just even two people, or they're living with their parents or whatever, friends or family. They're the ones that are kind of at risk and that are really looking for homes right now and can't afford them. So I think that's a very difficult number to even get a grasp of how much that's occurring out there. But that's another thing that we're looking at for sure.
Yeah,
Thank you
thanks,
so
Dan.
much, but I appreciate it.
Great question.
Dave Makewitz raised a question about what is the agency doing to educate the public about the needs here. A related question might be, does the county planning agency have enough staff to do the job that the growth in the community and this plan is going to necessitate? Dave, if I didn't really paraphrase your entire question, if you would like to elucidate your question, and then we can have Dan and Sam address that.
Well, John, you did a good job with it, but that's really the heart of the question. What I've seen some of the initial developer projects that have gone out in the community, and even where the town may have been trying to be supportive, they walk into a public meeting, there's a dozen people there with signs and not near me and all the typical NIMBY reactions. And then you watch the town council or the city mayor, whatever, just fold. And it seems like one of the things we really need to do is to take this excellent plan that you've developed and educate the public as to, it's not bad to have more density. It's not bad to have a variety of housing prices and opportunities for people. So just interested, is there a public education campaign that's could be added to this?
Well, I hope so. I mean, to answer the question with we have enough staff, the answer is no. I do have 2 positions I need to fill in the next few months. We do have great partners, great people in the community to work with. As far as a public education campaign, I mean, this is part of it, right? And then our comprehensive planning projects is part of it. But yeah, I don't think you could ever do enough. And to your point, Sam and I were talking about, because this is supposed to be about sustainability and the plan. And one of the things we talked about yesterday, and I think Sam pointed out, this provides the framework or the strategy for being more sustainable. But the sustainability part really is people. People have to make, more sustainable decisions. But they can't make a sustainable decision sometimes if the land use or the transit system or whatever doesn't support it. But yeah, you're right. I mean, that's really a key part is reaching people.
Dave, I think there's a couple aspects to your question that I see. There's the general public. I think in some cases there's the development community, making sure that members of the development community see models for how you do higher density, walkable, mixed use greenfield development or redevelopment of shopping malls, and show them, get us all on board with what that looks like, how it works, and to talk with other places that have done it successfully. And I know, Jared, we're talking about visiting a place called Eastdale Village down in the Hudson Valley outside of Poughkeepsie that is a really good example of what that can look like. And I think that's one of our challenges. We don't have really good examples in upstate New York, certainly not in Onondaga County, of what this looks like outside of the city of Syracuse or outside of our villages. We don't have good examples. So when you say density, people freak out. But the Route 31 corridor study built into that is doing the visualization so that people can start to see when we talk about this, what would it look like? What would it feel like for people? And I think we do need to do more work on that front. Because we don't have a lot of great examples. And I think the outcome, I'm hopeful the outcomes of that Route 31 corridor study will be helpful in beginning to educate people about what does this look like.
Yeah, I agree 100%. That's exactly what our plans and our grants are really working towards, especially when we, the comp plans, you can only get so far really, as far as that goes. But when we get into these more sub-area plans, as we call them, where we're really looking at a focused area, whether it's Inner Harbor or a node out in Camillus or up on 31, that's when you can really demonstrate the community. This is what it could look like. This is what it could feel like. And if you want this, if this is what you really want, this is the code that can support development of it. And then we're also working on tools of how do you pay for all that stuff? How do you pay for street trees, and how do you develop a street differently from a town road if you're a town? And all of those wonderful things. So yeah, no, the design-based planning, as we call it, is a very strong component of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Bob Haley had a question.
John, Peter Sarvers has hand up for a really long time.
Okay, well, I just was reading the chat and finding that. So I'm sorry I didn't notice the little yellow hand. Bob, can you be quick? Because I think it's
yes, I
related,
can.
because it's related to what we've been talking about.
That's exactly right. I wanted to follow this stream of thought, and it's good to hear that Peter's going to be the next question. Basically, it's time to educate, as everybody's been saying here. We know how long it takes to educate the public. Visualizations will be key, and our industry is a industry of builders and real estate people, as well as all of the components of what villages have now and what they want to see. It's very important to visualize as much as possible, and I would recommend for our central New York area, visualizing very specifically, even to the extent of housing types, on sustainable criteria of reducing land use, reducing footprints of the house, reducing components, reducing the area of the house to reduce the energy needed to do it, to reduce every aspect of sustainability, can be data-driven with, as a list, some pre-approved plans that will help the development industry get ahead of it. Spokane, Washington does a terrific job with, putting the carrots out there. You want to go the fast route? Here it is. And look, it's smaller, it's energy efficient, it fits into the villages. These are out there. They may not be in our area, and we know they're not, but that's my encouragement in this. And thanks so much for your presentation.
Thanks, Bob. Why don't we go right to Peter? We are approaching the end of our 90 minutes. So Peter, go ahead and we'll turn back to our panelists.
Well, I live in the city. I went up to Liverpool, the village, for an event last night, and what a nightmare. The corridor through the center of the village of Liverpool. And my question has to do with what's it going to take to extend BRT from the Destiny Transportation Center up to the northern suburbs, particularly to relieve the enormous congestion that seems to be perpetual in the village of Liverpool.
A lot. It's going to take a lot. It's taken a lot to get the BRT off the ground. I just went to a BRT implementation meeting a couple weeks ago with Centro, and that seems to be moving along pretty well. Yeah, these things move slowly, and I mean, how do we get people out of their cars? I guess is the main question too. But yeah, there's definitely some plans afoot, especially getting people. One of the big pushes is how do we get people from the city to make sure that those jobs that are being made available up in Clay, how do we get them there and make sure that they can get there on a reliable basis, not just for them, but for their families and everybody else that depends on them. And so that's kind of where a focus is right now. And then there are some other projects that are kind of kicking along, but I think right now the main focus is getting that phase 1 BRT established, mostly in the city of Syracuse, a little bit outside, but yeah, it's a great question though.
Yeah, and that question, and also Bob's point about the energy efficiency in the face of climate policy, I think is an important one to make sure that we're combining the need to grow, but also to do it in a way that minimizes the effect on our on our communities, our air pollution, and those things. I think Marshall, we'll give you the last question because we're kind of out of town. US, what kind of help, I guess, is available to developers to develop successful projects that meet the goals? Go ahead, Marshall.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I was talking with an award-winning architect who lives and works in Syracuse the other day, and he had a wonderful idea for a redevelopment project in Fayetteville. But one of the things we kept kicking around is like, well, that very same site, which actually had a plan rejected a number of years ago, and some other sites get negative feedback or rejection from people in the county that just don't want things done, or in the village that don't want things done. So in order to help advocate smart growth, smart development, or smart redevelopment, does the county have a way to help foster projects that it
that it wants to get behind, and that it believes are are really healthy for a village.
Kind of. I mean, it's a process for sure, and it's very community unique to each community. Some communities ask us for a lot of help and some don't. And so sometimes we get more involved than others. But for the there are other agencies though that are more likely to maybe weigh in, such as potentially our IDA, economic development. They have incentive programs. And also community development has the OCHIP program. And so sometimes it's a subsidy, that we offer. As far as planning issues, there have been times where we've been pulled in and I've been asked to kind of mediate the process and kind of show the benefits, kind of show the developer where why they're getting the opposition that they're getting. It's a tricky one because, one person's great idea is another person's nightmare. So, and whether or not you agree with the fact that it should be their nightmare or not, doesn't really matter because that's how they feel about it. And so you have to kind of tread very carefully in those situations, and just help the local community make the best decision they can.
Thanks, Dan. And we have exhausted our time, and I think we could probably go for another half an hour or an hour with your questions. But we probably should end it there. Greening USA is open to continuing this sort of dialogue by bringing in the other agencies, like Dan has mentioned, to tell us what they're doing and how to work together. At some point, Peter will have SMTC come in and share those ideas, and we can talk in depth, with Centro even, to talk in depth about some of the transportation strategies that we're all concerned about. So it's been a great discussion today. Thanks for your wonderful questions. Thanks for your wonderful presentation, Sam and Dan. We really appreciate you all being here today. Have a great weekend, everyone.